Anderson, Arambula, Bell, Bill Berryhill, Tom Berryhill, Blakesley, Block, Blumenfield, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Caballero, Calderon, Carter, Chesbro, Conway, Cook, Cotto, Davis, De La Torre, De Leon, DeVore, Emerson, Ing, Evans, Fior, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Fuller, Furutani, Gaines, Galgiani, Garrick, Gilmore, Hagman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Liu, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mendoza, Miller, Monning, Nava, Nestande, Nilo, Nielsen, John A. Perez, Vimanuel Perez, Portantino, Ruskin, Salas, Saldana, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Strickland, Swanson, Torlixon, Torres, Tarico, Tran, Valines, Yamada, Madam Speaker.
A quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of chambers and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask Assembly Chaplain, Assemblymember Silva, to offer the day's prayer.
Bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask you to guide us this day that we might fill our hearts and minds with wisdom and courage, the courage to do what we know is right and the wisdom to know when we are wrong. Help us find peace of mind and give us a contented heart. Grant us this. In your name we pray. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to now continue standing and join us in the flag salute. Please join Assemblymember Salas as she leads us in the pledge. You may be seated. The reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Tuesday, January 26, 2010. The Assembly met at 7 a.m.
Ms. Ma moves. Mr. Hagman seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentation of petitions, there are none. Introductions and references of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. Is Hagman? Motions and resolutions. Ms. Ma.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to allow Assemblymember Silva to speak on an adjourned in memory today.
Without objection, the request is granted.
Mr. Speaker, at the request of the author, please return file item 7, AB 1369 Davis, to the Senate for further action.
Without objection, the request is granted.
Mr. Speaker, at the request of the authors, please send the following bills to the inactive file. File item 8, AB 39 by Huffman. File item 9, AB 49, Fior. File item 10, SB 458, Steinberg. File item 11, SB 12, Simidian. And file item 33, AB 1054, Koto.
The clerk will note. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I'm re-referring the following bills to committee. File item 59, AB 347 block, to the Revenue and Taxation Committee. Second reading, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 151, 743, 978, and Assembly Bill 1590 with amendments.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Concurrence in Senate amendments. Without objection, we'll move to file item 59 for the purpose of amendment. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 347 with amendments by Assemblymember Bass.
File item 59, AB 347. Mr. Block, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present amendments to AB 347. The amendments delete the existing contents of the bill, change the author from Block to Bass, and add myself and Assemblymember Calderon as principal co-authors. Specifically, the amendments to this bill allow individual and/or corporate taxpayers who make cash contributions to eligible charitable organizations for earthquake relief efforts in Haiti from January 11, 2010 until March 1, 2010 to take a tax deduction in the 2009 tax year. Last Friday, January 22nd, President Obama signed into law H.R. 4462, a bipartisan measure which allows charitable contributions made to earthquake relief efforts in Haiti to be deducted from federal taxes in the 2009 tax year instead of waiting until the 2010 tax year. The amendments for AB 347 conform state law to federal law. The amendments make it easier and encourage more to give and participate in relief efforts that our neighbors in Haiti desperately need. I am honored to be a principal co-author, and I thank you for your consideration of these amendments. I respectfully ask your support.
Any question or debate on the amendments? Okay. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 69A, any members that are interested in being co-authors should come up to the desk and inform the staff of their interests. The desk staff will process the co-author list accordingly. Ms. Mon.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirements to allow the Revenue and Taxation Committee to meet and to hear AB 347 today during session upon call of the Chair in the Rules Committee room.
Without objection, the amendments are adopted. Without objection, Ms. Ma's request is granted. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I'm re-referring the following bill to the committee. File item 59, AB 347 block, to the Revenue and Taxation Committee.
Pass and retain.
Concurrence and Senate amendments pass and retain. Conference reports pending, pass and retain. Reconsideration, motion is continued. Assembly, third reading. File item 21. Assembly Bill 1451. Mr. Amiano, are you ready to proceed on this item? The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1451 by Assemblymember Amiano, an act relating to local government.
Mr. Amiano, you may open.
Thank you, Madam. Mr. Speaker and members, I'd like to present AB 1451. This bill would allow county governments across the state to issue municipal identification cards to residents without regard to immigration status or gender identity. There's a compelling government interest in ensuring that all Californians have government-issued proof of identity. Identification of this type is necessary to access many civil and county resources or to open bank accounts. It can also be useful to law enforcement purposes. The cards have been accepted at banks, libraries, city officials, state, and most places where ID cards are necessary. Municipal identification cards cannot be used as driver's licenses or as proof of majority to buy tobacco or alcohol. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All those members vote who desire to vote. All 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 members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Amiano moves the call. File item 22, AB 419. Ms. Caballero, are you ready to proceed on this item? The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 419 by Assemblymember Caballero, an act relating to local government.
Ms. Caballero, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Current law contained in the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Local Reorganization Act of 2000 is vague regarding the time frame and process to be undertaken by local governments upon notification by its LAFCO that an item that has been approved requires an election. There is no deadline specified for a county board, city council, or elections officials to place a LAFCO-approved item on the ballot. AB 419 brings clarity to this process. AB 419 specifies that if the county board, the city council fail to authorize the election within a 45-day time frame, that the election official has authorization to place the item on the ballot during the next regular election. The requirements of the bill would take effect prospectively on January 1st, 2011 for future applications requiring an election. This is a technical cleanup, provides an opportunity for the Elections Department to move forward with a very important LAFCO issue. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 52, noes 0. The measure passes. File item 23, AJR 24. Ms. Lowenthal, are you ready to proceed? The clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 24 by Assemblymember Bonnie Lowenthal relative to marine air pollution.
Ms. Lowenthal, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AJR 24 is about cargo ship exhaust and coastlines and international efforts for cleaner air. It stems from the Maritime Pollution Treaty, which the United States ratified in 2008, and I'm happy to say it's also about the competitiveness of California ports and jobs. In 2009, the United States joined Canada and France to create a 200-mile emission control area off the coastline of the U.S., Canada, and the French islands of Saint-Pierre and Miquelon. It requires ships in this zone to use lower emission fuels, reducing NOx, SOx, and particulate matter pollution in the coastal areas of the U.S. In order for the zone to become a reality, it still needs the approval of the International Maritime Organization of the United Nations. AJR urges the IMO to grant that approval. It's not only good for our air, which is why the EPA proposed it, it's good for our ports, because it levels the playing field by requiring ports in other states to follow similar clean air rules. And the shippers themselves are sponsoring this resolution because they believe it'll be good for business. In 2005, the Assembly resolution asking the EPA to submit an application for the emission control area received 62 Assembly co-authors and passed out of this House 70-1. This bill received bipartisan support in the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials and received no votes. I'd like to open the roll for co-authors, Mr. Speaker.
First roll is for co-authors. Open the roll. The first roll is for co-authors. Clerk will close the roll. We have 39 co-authors. The next roll is on the main motion. The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 47, noes 0. The measure passes. Item number 24 will pass and retain temporarily. Item number 25, Ms. Brownlee, AB 220. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 220 by Assemblymember Brownlee, an act relating to public education facilities.
Ms. Brownlee, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill was introduced last year as a placeholder bill for the next education bond. We know there's a need for a bond, but at this time we do not know if the state budget will make a bond viable, so I have deleted that provision for now. However, I've not given up on pursuing either a bond or some other method for financing school facilities. I think we need to come up potentially with a responsible solution, but until then, that portion of the bill has been deleted. The bill before you makes changes to the provisions that govern the administration of education bond funds and addresses issues that have arisen before the State Allocation Board. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 55, noes 0. The measure passes. File item 26, AB 317 by Mr. Solorio. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 317 by Assemblymember Solorio, an act relating to school attendance and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Solorio, you may open.
Mr. Speaker and members, this bill deems the H1N1 influenza virus an epidemic for fiscal years 2009-10 and 2010-11. This bill protects the health of students and allows schools to keep their regular ADA funding when students miss school as a result of the H1N1 influenza. This bill is supported by the California School Boards Association, the Small School Districts Association, and the California Association of School Business Officials. There is no opposition. I ask for your aye vote.
Question or debate? Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Speaker. Question of the author.
Without objection.
Upon reading this, I'm a little bit concerned it may be abused and used for other reasons. What are the safeguards that are in place to protect that it is just truly H1N1?
Well, first off, I would say that current law allows for these type of epidemics and other emergencies, so there's a process in place with safeguards. Also, as you would know, it is often the case that students do bring a doctor's note related to their absence. But also, in this case, this has become so widespread that many doctors are no longer going through the additional diagnosis to say it was specifically H1N1, but they do have a process at the local school sites for that. There are also audits by the state in terms of how these things are documented, so there are already safeguards in place to document fraud, not just for this type of epidemic, but for other absences as well, so there's a process in place.
Thank you.
You may close if you'd like, Mr. Solorio.
I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 58, no 0 on urgency. Ayes 58, no 0 on the measure. The measure passes. File item 33, AB 1054. Mr. Cotto, are you ready to proceed? No? Passed temporarily. File item number 34, AB 1199. Mr. Amiano, are you ready to proceed? The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1199 by Assemblymember Amiano, an act relating to infrastructure financing districts.
Mr. Amiano, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I present to you Assembly Bill 1199, a measure similar to AB 1166, which passed the legislature with unanimous bipartisan support last year and was so colorfully vetoed by our esteemed governor. AB 1199 expands support of San Francisco's infrastructure financing powers by enabling capture of growth in property taxes from port revitalization efforts in the Pier 70 area. We worked closely with the Senate Appropriations Committee last year on the prior measure. Specifically, AB 1199 has been drafted to prohibit the formation of a Pier 70 IFD for 3 years from the time this bill would become law, thus deferring any backfill until that time. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 54, noes 0. The measure passes. File item number 39, AB 1414. Mr. Hill, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1414 by Assemblymember Hill, an act relating to controlled substances.
Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assembly Bill 1414 would change the placement of the substance apomorphine from Schedule 2 to Schedule 5 within the California Uniform Controlled Substances Act. Currently, apomorphine is classified as a Schedule 2 controlled substance, a classification that is generally defined by drugs that have an accepted medical value, yet present a high potential for abuse and may lead to severe psychological or physical dependence if abused. Aside from the name, apomorphine does not contain morphine or its skeleton. While morphine is appropriately classified as a Schedule 2 controlled substance, apomorphine does not meet the criteria set forth above and should be reclassified. The federal government initially included apomorphine in the federal schedule but removed it from all schedules in 1976. In fact, California is the only state that schedules this substance. After discussions with the Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement, they would be comfortable with rescheduling the substance to Schedule 5 or not to schedule it at all. There is no opposition to this measure, and it has no votes, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 59, no 0. The measure passes. File item 43, AB 1239. Mr. Solorio, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1239 by Assemblymember Solorio, an act relating to prisoners.
Mr. Solorio, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill seeks to preserve funding for academic and vocation education programs within the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Recent budget cuts within CDCR are dismantling core rehabilitation programs and do so in a manner that fails to reduce recidivism at great future cost to taxpayers and public safety. Furthermore, nearly 700 teachers are receiving layoff notices now, and entire academic programs are being eliminated throughout the state. This bill seeks to incentivize increased participation in and completion of education and vocational programs, and to preserve those programs when possible in order to help inmates re-enter society. Thank you, and I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Nielsen.
Mr. Speaker, I would urge a layoff or a no vote on this at this point. Hard decisions have got to be made and were last year related to these rehabilitation programs. I truly believe in them. Obviously, my past experience had me spend many years dealing with them, and they are indeed important. And the bill is a good statement indeed of the value of the programs, but I think it's imprudent for us to undo a budget reduction of last year at this point. Keep it open, and certainly these programs will have to be returned in the future because you must have such things as rehabilitation. But I'd urge a caution in your vote right now.
Mr. Solorio, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just share with everyone in this body that it sends a bad message to California if we don't want to offer any rehabilitation or education in our prisons. This bill's a modest measure to say we should try to preserve those programs when we can. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 46, noes 1. Measure passes. Item 44 passed temporarily. Item 47, AB 498 by Ms. Hayashi. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 498 by Assemblymember Hayashi, an act relating to vehicles.
You may open, Ms. Hayashi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill allows former prisoners of war, ex-POWs, the option to order a veteran's license plate and still be exempt from vehicle license and registration fees. Currently, ex-POW license plates with the letters POW are issued to the ex-POWs seeking the vehicle license and registration fee exemptions. While they're proud of their military service, not all are comfortable advertising that they were a former POW. This bill would allow ex-POWs the option to select a license plate that best recognizes their service. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 55, no 0. The measure passes. Back under motions and resolutions, Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure today to introduce one of the great high schools from the district that I represent, Mercy High School from Burlingame. Ladies, thank you for being here. Thank you. And Mr. Speaker, I believe Mr. Monning has an announcement as well.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd also like to welcome Mercy High School here from Burlingame, and especially to recognize Ms. Eileen Cannongeiser, the niece of a staff member of mine, my scheduler, Kathy Smith. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you both, and welcome our guests. A couple of housekeeping items, members. I want to just update everybody on our plan for proceeding today. As you've noticed, we're beginning with support items. We will be here from 9:30 to 1:30. At 1:30, we will take a break. The Joint Committee on Budget will meet from 1:30 to 3 p.m., and session will resume at 3 p.m. We will not be taking a lunch break per se, so you should make your own arrangements. Without objection, we'll return to file item 44, AB 1518 by Mr. Anderson. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1518 by Assemblymember Anderson, an act relating to state boards, commissions, and committees.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Assembly Bill 1518 is a simple, good government bill. AB 1518 calls on the Department of Finance to identify and report state obsolete boards and commissions and report back. I hope you'll join me in this first step towards greater transparency and accountability in government. I ask for an aye vote.
Question or debate, Ms. Huber.
Question of the author.
Without objection.
This isn't my first bill.
Mr. Anderson, are you taking co-authors to this bill?
Absolutely. I'd love to have you as a co-author.
Thank you very much.
You may close, Mr. Anderson.
I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 54, no 0. Measure passes. File item 50, AB 551 by Mr. Furutani. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 551 by Assemblymember Furutani and others, an act relating to education funding.
Mr. Furutani, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, funding for education these days is in difficult times. The issue of stability relative to how people move forward in terms of planning for their funding for higher education is critical. AB 551 would require that the Legislative Analyst's Office conduct a study that determines whether general fund dollars or property tax revenues provide the most stable funding source for California community colleges. This study would look at the general fund and the property tax allocation to community colleges for the last 20 years. The issue of how to best fund community college is at question, and the issue of how to most stably fund community college is the point of AB 551. I urge and I vote. Thank you.
Question or debate, Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise tentatively in support of this only because community colleges consistently get the shaft when it comes to the funding allocation. I would very much like to see them have their own funding source. However, my fear is, well, right now, if they increase their fees, it just goes into the big Prop 98 fund. It does not help the community college. But my fear is that they're going to get further winnowed out in all of this. So I support it hesitantly because I support the community college system and believe they need their separate funding. But I would hate to see it gobbled up or thrown on local governments or make this some kind of cause celeb to somehow undo Prop 13, which I can see this train going down the track. So with that reservation that there's no shenanigans going on, I will support this. Thank you.
Mr. Furutani, you may close.
Thank you very much. The point is well taken. This is not that ambitious a bill to try to derail Prop 13. All this is a bill to look at the stability of funding for community colleges. I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. All the members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote? Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 55, no 0. The measure passes. File item 52, AB 953 by Mr. Ring. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 953 by Assemblymember Inc., an act relating to vehicles.
Mr. Ring, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 953 clarifies current law by allowing authorized insurance company agents to obtain address records directly from the Department of Motor Vehicles rather than having the insurance company obtain the information and then transferring it. It subjects information obtained under this provision to the use or disclosure limitations and security requirements currently governing insurance companies under state and federal law, thus providing the same high level of protection. Finally, it clarifies that the information under the bill must be directly related to a vehicle accident involving a client of the insurance company. So it limits the circumstances and use of the DMV data. This bill has been unanimously supported in both Policy and Fiscal Committee and has no registered opposition. Recommend an aye vote.
Seeing no further members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 58, no 0. The measure passes. Item 55 passed temporarily. Item 56 passed temporarily. Item 54, AB 1254 by Mr. Tom Berryhill. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1254 by Assemblymember Tom Berryhill, an act relating to fish and wildlife.
Mr. Berryhill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. This bill is a very simple bill. We've had no votes on it. It's a bipartisan bill that enacts simple changes in the Fish and Game Code. And I will remain engaged with all stakeholders as this policy moves forward. I will say that as we move forward, I would hope that when these bills go through committees that we continue to have transparency and the amendments aren't taken out of these bills without being notified. But I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 56, no 0. The measure passes. File item 63, SB 85 by Senator Cogdell. Ms. Yamada will present. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 85 by Senator Cogdell and others, an act relating to local government finance.
Ms. Yamada, you may
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I am representing Senate Bill 85 that this body passed by a 77-1 vote. This past September, it was returned to the Senate to address some concerns expressed by one of the counties included in this bill. This bill provides very modest tax relief for small and low-wealth counties, including Alpine, Lassen, Mariposa, Plumas, Stanislaus, Trinity, and Yolo, that have been traditionally hurt by formulas related to the ERAF shifts that affect just these counties in a disproportionate way. I would ask that you consider this as part of some equity addressing low wealth and rural counties, and respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 54, no 0. Ayes 55, no 0. Measure passes. File item 63, pass and retain. File item 16, ACA 5. Mr. Calderon, are you ready to proceed? File item 16 passed temporarily. File item 17 passed temporarily. File item 18 passed temporarily. File item 19 passed temporarily. File item 20. Ms. Marr, are you ready to proceed on AB 987? Ms. Marr, are you ready to proceed on 987?
I am, Mr. Speaker.
The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 987 by Assemblymember Ma, an act relating to transit facilities.
Ms. Ma, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 987 allows cities or counties to allocate property tax increment revenue to pay for public facilities and amenities within transit village development districts. The Transit Village Development Planning Act of 1994 authorizes a city or county to prepare a transit village plan to help deal with negative impacts of unrestricted growth and sprawl. But the Transit Village Development Planning Act of 1994 provides no financing tool to accomplish its goals. Thus, transit-oriented developments must compete with other local priorities and limited transit dollars. California voters approved high-speed rail in 2008. As the High-Speed Rail Authority and local governments work on getting the system's first segment from San Francisco to Los Angeles completely up and running by 2018, it's important that we encourage transit-oriented development around these terminals. AB 987 provides a financing tool for local governments without raising taxes and reallocating property tax from school districts. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I strongly rise in opposition to this. I think the voters ought to have a say in their transit districts as any other district if they're going to be taxed for them. I also am reading article after article about the high-speed rail and the numbers not being quite justified. There's no exact assumptions of what's going on. It's in some trouble. So, yeah, the voters approved the bond, but I don't think the voters approved what we're getting now in our committees where nobody seems to know who's on first with the financing with this. So to keep pushing this train, quote unquote, down the track, I think is a very poor move on our state. Our state is, our credit rating is downgraded sufficiently. There are articles written in all of the finance papers and publications about, right now, this morning, will California default on its debt? This is a very serious problem, and before we start taxing more at the local levels, we need to take care of what's going on in the state. And I've been saying this since last December. The state is fundamentally bankrupt, and to keep pushing these things on the ballots, to keep insisting that locals and the state assume more debt is just really folly at this point. We need to push some of these things off and heal our state, get ourselves on a firm financial footing before we start proceeding down the high-speed rail track. Thank you.
Ms. Galgiani.
I rise to comment on something that was said there. First of all, we're awaiting federal stimulus funding, and it's widely anticipated that within the next 48 hours there will be some announcements as to the dollar amounts that states shall receive. The comments about the financial impact came from one report that was done hastily without any consultation with from anyone that has had any experience in building a mega project or a high-speed train system. California has memorandums of understanding with 6 countries that have built successful, profitable systems. We have 135 senior managers that have been involved in building these projects. We are on track to have a profitable system that's going to put 160,000 workers to work within the next few years just to start. Thank you.
Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you love high-speed rail, if you don't like the cost of high-speed rail, if you love mass transit, if you don't, that really isn't the issue here before this body. The issue is, honestly, do you trust voters? The issue is, Do you want to allow people, the residents of this state, the taxpayers, the voters of this state, to retain their rights to vote on tax increases? Do you want to allow them to retain their right to control their government? Or do you want to give that power to the bureaucracy? If you do not trust the voters, if you do not want to keep the voters empowered to have oversight, then by all means approve this bill. Vote for this bill. But if you are going to vote on the side of taxpayers and voters, then you must oppose this bill.
Mr. Ng.
Members, this bill is about giving local governments the options to use transit-oriented development to deal with issues of congestion, of issues of getting working families to where they need to work, where they need to study, and where they need to access retail outlets for their goods and services. This bill is about options, and this is about giving local government the ability to comply with SB 347 and AB 32. We cannot require local governments to comply with those legislative mandates without giving them the tools. I support this measure wholeheartedly. It's about jobs. It's about environmental justice. It's about access. It's about tools for local government. Respectfully request an aye vote.
Mr. Bradford.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this bill as well. As an individual who spent 12 years on local government with our own transportation department, we just built a similar facility such as this in our city, and it was one of the most economic facilities we built, green, efficient, but more importantly, it helped remove blight in a community that was overbuilt. It gives cities more authority at this time when we're taking away state and federal funding. It gives them the choice of determining their future. And if you would ask any local government, that's all they want, because they're fearful that we're going to continue to take money away from them. So allowing them to determine their future is key, but more importantly, it allows folks greater access to transportation in this tough economic time when gas prices are going up. I ask for an aye vote.
Ms. Ma, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Yes, I do trust voters. Voters voted for us. Voters vote for their local elected officials, and this bill gives back local control back to the local officials so that they will be able to allocate their local revenues for transit-oriented development. In this era of very scarce resources, we need to provide more tools in the toolbox for locals to develop around their transit hubs. I respectfully ask for your aye vote, members.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Ms. Ma moves the call. File item 24, AB 35, Mr. Furutani. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 35 by Assemblymember Furutani, an act relating to education.
Mr. Furutani, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, tonight the President is going to make his State of the Nation speech, and one of his key themes is going to be the discussion of jobs. Everybody's talking about jobs and how they're key to making sure that we have the economic recovery that we need in this country and in this state. But if we're talking about jobs, we're talking about needing an educated workforce that's prepared to take on the jobs of the 21st century. At this point in the state of California, we have a patchwork-based job training programs throughout the state, whether it's community colleges, K-12, RLP, ROC, all the different kinds of programs we have. They've been developed on their own, and what this bill does is it asks CPAC, the California Post-Secondary Education Commission, to make recommendations for a strategic plan for our approach to career technical education and workforce development. We have to demand that these bureaucracies tear down the silos and work more efficiently and cooperatively with the limited resources that we have, and this is what CPEC will provide, recommendations how to best do this. I ask for your aye vote. Jobs are critical. This is the beginning of a strategic plan that will prepare the workforce for the jobs we're talking about for the recovery of the state and the nation. Thank you.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 All members vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Furutani moves the call. File item 27, AB 384. Ms. Ma, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 384 by Assemblymember Ma, an act relating to taxation.
Ms. Ma, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 384 ensures fair and equitable assessment of certified aircraft. Specifically, AB 384 extends the sunset date and provisions of the centralized fleet calculation program. The program has proven to be effective, allowing assessors to carry out their mandated responsibility to fairly assess all taxable property within their jurisdiction in an efficient manner. Without a centralized valuation, every county would have to conduct its own valuation and audit of each airline that lands in its county. AB 384 ensures that administrative efficiencies for both the airlines and counties continue and has received bipartisan support. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill is a complex work in progress. I applaud the author in diligently working with all of the interested parties, both from the county assessors to the various airlines that serve California. I believe that perhaps a little more work is needed on this bill, but it's my belief that the author is committed to continue to answer some of the remaining concerns from the airline industry as well as our county assessors, and for that reason I will be supporting this bill this morning.
Ms. Ma, you may close.
Thank you, members. Well, when Chuck DeVore supports my bill, I'm good.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 51, noes 2. The measure passes. File item 28, Assembly Bill 408 by Ms. Saldana. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 408 by Assemblymember Saldana, an act relating to commercial fishing.
You may open, Ms. Saldana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this also is about jobs. This is a bill about the future job security for the 180 or so lobster fishermen all around Southern California. They have approached my office and asked for the ability to pay into a fund to ensure the long-term sustainability of the lobster resources in Southern California. Now, this is an industry that provides over $8 million of direct economic benefit to the state just from their fishing alone. The ripple effect to restaurants, to tourism, to all of the other secondary effects of people having fresh local lobsters caught in Southern California waters is far beyond that $8 million. Now, this bill did come before you last year. It had some bipartisan support. I really do appreciate that. Unfortunately, the administration thought that some of the costs might be too high. We've taken amendments to adjust those costs. So I once again ask for your support. Protect jobs for the lobster fishermen and their families. These are obviously not jobs that will ever be outsourced, ever be sent overseas. The lobsters aren't moving, neither are the fishermen. Please keep them in their employment. I ask for your support.
Seeing no member seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Ms. Saldana moves the call. File item 29, AB 424 by Ms. Torres. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 424 by Assemblymember Torres, an act relating to the 911 telephone system.
Ms. Torres, you may open.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and members. Assembly Bill 424 establishes a public education program to help the public better understand the proper and inappropriate uses of the 911 system. Currently, the 911 system is overburdened with unnecessary calls of non-emergency nature. That could be better handled by existing county and city services already existing, such as 211 and 311, and nonprofit organizations such as WeTip. The misuse of 911 emergency system contributes to the failure to meet minimum response times in California and endangers crime victims and persons in need of assistance. The bill tasks the State Chief Information Officer with developing a program, taking input from phone carriers and the responder communities, including the 911 Advisory Board. There is no opposition, and we have strong support from the telephone carrier industry and law enforcement and public safety.
Mr. Jeffries.
Members, we have an oppose on our side of the aisle, and I've got to say that this bill actually does have some merit, and I would ask you to weigh this in your considerations related to the costs versus the merits of this bill. Having spent the time I did in the fire service and taking 911 calls for a short period of time, and my wife having been a sheriff's dispatcher, people do seriously abuse the 911 system. They call with ridiculous items related to cooking food, to making park spot reservations, issues that are taking limited dispatchers and having to divert their time away from answering true life or death phone calls. I mean, serious folks calling in with a family member in full arrest with a heart attack or a serious traffic accident, and the dispatcher is on the phone listening to someone who wants help with a recipe for their food or to reserve a park space. It is a real problem out there. I don't know what the costs are for this program, but I do know that the issue is real, and I would urge you to consider that in your vote.
Seeing no other mics, you may close, Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Ms. Torres moves the call. File item 30, AB 558 by Mr. Portantino. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 558 by Assemblymember Portantino, an act relating to sexual assault crimes.
Mr. Portantino, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I am presenting AB 558, a reintroduction of AB 1017, a bill that I introduced to ensure that California does everything it can to find and convict rapists. In 2008, it was discovered that the city and county of Los Angeles had over 10,000 unopened rape kits in their evidence lockers. Of these, the city of Los Angeles alone had 403 unopened rape kits that the result of stranger rapes. It is naive to believe that Los Angeles is the only community in the state that is not testing its rape kits. AB 558 will require all law enforcement agencies to report to the Department of Justice their statistics on the numbers of rape kits that they collect and test, and the numbers of these tests that are stranger rapes or where the identity of the assailant is contested. This measure is the same as AB 1017, which was supported by the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, Crime Victims United, and numerous other organizations. It received bipartisan support and passed this House on a 78-0 vote. Rape kits are evidence of crime. In order to remain admissible in a criminal trial, such evidence must be logged that it has come in and tracked and maintained so that law enforcement's chain of custody is established. To fail to do so will cause the evidence to be inadmissible. Frankly, the Senate Appropriations Committee noted that the costs associated with AB 1017 would be likely very minor, if not reimbursable. Please help protect women by calling for accountability in the process of rape kit testing, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 54, noes 0. The measure passes. File item 31, AB 633 by Mr. Amiano. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 633 by Assemblymember Amiano, an act relating to the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation.
You may open, Mr. Amiano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I present to you AB 633, a measure to amend the Sexual Abuse in Detention Elimination Act. AB 633 would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the current list of factors that should be considered when classifying and housing prisoners. One of the most important tools available to corrections officials to prevent sexual assault is the use of appropriate prisoner classification and housing protocols. Unfortunately, existing law does not provide specific protections for LGBT inmates housed by CDCR. The bill is identical to AB 382 from last year. Many of you supported this bill at that time, and it received a wide bipartisan support in this House. I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll. We were there for a second. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Amiano moves the call. File item 32, AB 984 by Mr. Nava. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 984 by Assemblymember Nava, an act relating to crimes.
Mr. Nava, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. On October 24th of this year, or actually of 2009, a young woman only 16 years old left her high school dance to get a ride from her father. Unfortunately, she joined some young men and began drinking with them. They soon began their assault. Several of them beat her, robbed her, and repeatedly raped her while people looked on without taking any action. Police believe that there were up to 10 attackers and anywhere from 15 to 20 people stopping to watch. Authorities said that people took photos, laughed, and some joined in as the girl was repeatedly assaulted. People came and went, and no one called the police. Under current law, had the victim of this rape been under 14 years of age, observers who failed to report would have been committing a misdemeanor. The victim in this case was 16, which means that the witnesses who did nothing could not be held accountable. This bill eliminates the reporting requirement that the victim be under 14 years of age. All victims of violent crime deserve to be helped. It's appalling that this young girl who could have been saved from hours of torment and pain. Instead of stopping to snap photos with their cell phones, witnesses should have been using them to call for help. Current law already compels citizens to report the most heinous violent crimes, but it makes no sense to put a value on someone's life merely because of their age. This bill has received strong bipartisan support, passing out of public safety and with a unanimous bipartisan vote in appropriations. This law is similar to those in Massachusetts, Ohio, and Nevada. I'd ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Amiano? Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 48, noes 1. Measure passes. Item 35 passed temporarily. Item 36, AB 1391 by Mr. Ng. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1391 by Assemblymember Ng, an act relating to acupuncture.
Mr. Ng, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 1391 will allow the California Acupuncture Board to continue to protect the public, develop and enforce educational standards, license our many acupuncturists, and protect the public. This legislation simply amends the sunset date of the board to January 1st, 2017. The Acupuncture Board is completely self-funding. Their operating budget comes from membership fines and dues. In the last fiscal year, the board spent a total of $1.8 million and brought in a total $2.5 million in revenue. The board has a cash reserve that will allow them to operate for about 20 months. Members, as a former vice chair of this board, I know firsthand that it's a valuable resource, a trusted institution, and a protector of the consumer's interests. I request and I support.
Question or debate, Mr. Nilsson.
Mr. Speaker, old habits die hard. Ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, I would urge an aye vote on this measure. The sunset review process is a typical one. It has its merit. It's kind of gotten bureaucratized a little bit, I think. As you look at the boards, and they're all looked at, this is one that I think indeed is worthy of continuation. I go back 30 years with the Asian Pacific and Islander community, being very close to them. Helped found the Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association with Mr. C.C. Yin, and this is very important to that culture, but acupuncture and Oriental medicine has mainstreamed as a complement to full-term conventional American medicine. It serves and helps many, many people. I am familiar with the operation of this board. I do believe it is more than worthy of continuance, and I urge your aye vote.
Mr. Ng, you may close.
Respectfully request an aye vote after that eloquent speech.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Ng moves the call. File item 37, AB 1504 by Ms. Skinner. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1504 by Assemblymember Skinner, an act relating to forest resources.
Ms. Skinner, you may open.
Members and Mr. Speaker, AB 1504 requires the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection to assess whether its timber harvesting regulations and other programs can meet or exceed the greenhouse gas reduction goals set forth in AB 32 scoping plan. Since the scoping plan anticipates a certain percentage of greenhouse gas emissions reduction from forest practices, it seemed imperative to have the Department of Forestry weigh in. The estimated costs to prepare the assessment are absorbable since it is currently undergoing an assessment, and because the department would be assisted by having some objective assessment of their of this report. The assessment would be subject to an independent scientific peer review, just like the various other documents associated with AB 32. So I appreciate your support, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Ms. Skinner moves the call. File item 38, Assembly Bill 1533 by Mr. Liu. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1533 by Assemblymember Liu, an act relating to state employees.
Mr. Liu, you may open.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker and members, the 1,750 physicians, dentists, and podiatrists who work in our state departments and agencies have been without a memorandum of understanding since June 30th, 2008. AB 1533 is a vehicle to be used to approve the final collective bargaining agreement reached this year between the state and State Bargaining Unit 16. I respectfully request that we move this vehicle forward for these hardworking physicians, dentists, and podiatrists. Thank you.
Seeing no question or debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Liu moves the call. File item 40, AB 1178 by Mr. Block. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1178 by Assemblymember Block and others, an act relating to taxation to take effect immediately. Tax levy.
Mr. Block, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, AB 1178 makes college textbooks more affordable for today's struggling students. This bill would suspend the state's sales tax on textbooks and supplies purchased at a California community college, CSU, or UC bookstore, which would cost the state approximately $120 million per year, but would save the students that same amount, according to the Board of Equalization. This bill would allow us to help our students, and the cost to the state would be defrayed by closing a tax loophole which a few large corporations have been abusing for years. These bad actors avoid paying tax on income they make in California by stashing it in offshore tax haven shelters. The Franchise Tax Board estimates that closing this loophole, like other states have already done, would keep approximately $120 million per year in our state. Let's be clear, this is not about creating a new tax. It's about closing a loophole on an existing tax, an action that can simultaneously help to relieve a tax burden placed on students trying to succeed to become tomorrow's workforce. I know that's a value we all share. The California Labor Federation, the California Professional Firefighters, the University of California Faculty Associations, and the California Tax Reform Association are among those who support the bill. I ask for your aye vote.
Question or debate? Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to oppose this measure. Members, it's very clear that what the author is doing is by increasing a tax on multinational corporations, and that's what this does, and then allocating money raised to another function to then claim revenue neutrality, the intent of which, of course, is to avoid triggering Article 13 of our California Constitution. Now, why is that important? Well, Article 13 indicates that this body needs to muster a two-thirds vote to approve tax increases. By allocating money raised to another function, of course, and keeping this supposedly revenue neutral, the fiction of this maneuver then allows for a majority, a simple majority vote rather than a two-thirds vote. Ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, this is a tax increase. Make no mistake, this will prejudice companies that create jobs from wanting to expand or relocate to California. Ladies and gentlemen, we already have the fourth highest unemployment rate in the nation. That's partially due to the fact that we have the third or fourth highest overall tax rate, and when combined with our crushing regulatory burden, we have, according to Forbes magazine, the worst combination of taxes and regulations of any state in the union, even worse than New York or New Jersey. This is why we're losing productive tax-paying citizens every week to places like Texas. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this makes that problem worse. It makes California a less inviting place in which to do business by raising taxes on precisely those entities that employ Californians. I would implore you to vote no on this measure, to preserve California's tax base and jobs, and to resist the temptation to raise taxes in the midst of a deep recession. I urge a no vote for this measure.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, members, I rise in support of this measure. I hate to do this, but the little history is in order here. Connected with this issue is a concept called water's edge. In other words, if some company is completely out of this United States, then they shouldn't be taxed for any business they do in here. And that was a big debate as to how you apportion taxes, not only between states, but between countries in terms of American subsidiaries. Well, the idea was, let's just make a policy statement. Let's draw the line at the water's edge. But at the time, we didn't anticipate, although perhaps we should have, didn't anticipate that we were creating a huge loophole that perhaps wasn't even visible until more recent times when we became more of a global economy. And now companies can go to Switzerland, and they can go to the Caymans, and they can go to these countries where no taxes are employed, and, for instance, establish the company that creates the cure for cancer and transfer the patent over there, for instance. So we're not really imposing a tax. We're trying to capture taxes that should be paid already. Now, I'm always troubled by the argument that we have the highest taxes in the nation, and although I haven't really done my own research, I accept the debate on the floor, and so I get troubled about how it impacts jobs, especially now. But that argument doesn't work here, because the argument holds that what we should do is allow taxpayers to cheat in order to attract business into California. Now, I agree that would work. I agree that would work, and maybe we should consider that. Maybe we should consider having no taxes so that companies from out of the country will come here, and that'll create jobs, and that will ultimately improve our economy. But I think that's a debate for another time. here it does not hold water. We shouldn't be required to compete for business and to compete for jobs by competing with other states that allow taxpayers to avoid their tax laws. I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Block, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The General Accounting Office has produced a report that shows that there is one building in the Cayman Islands, one building that houses 19,000 U.S. corporations. This building is a building where no actual work is done. It is merely a haven for these corporations so they can defer taxes earned in the United States, cash earned in the United States, so they don't have to pay tax on it, robbing our country and robbing California of millions, the country of billions of dollars. I hope that we don't look at allowing corporations to cheat our students from tax dollars that they deserve to be spent on education, that allowing this is the only way that our great state can attract and keep corporations. We've got to vote yes if we care about students, if we care about defraying the cost of textbooks, and I guess you'll vote no if you believe in keeping this corporate tax break, tax haven. I urge your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Block moves the call. Mr. Tirico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By way of announcement, the Revenue and Taxation Committee members to meet immediately in the Rules Committee room. Revenue and Taxation Committee to meet in the Rules Committee room immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Tirico. Again, members of the Revenue and Taxation Committee, if you can make your way to the Rules Committee room, we will proceed with the daily file. File item 41, AB 1223, by Mr. Block. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1223 by Assemblymember Block and others, an act relating to linked learning.
Mr. Block, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Studies show that when schools link core academic subjects to student career goals, students are more motivated, less likely to be absent, and less likely to drop out of school. AB 1223 authorizes the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing to convene a work group to develop standards for teacher preparation programs that seek to provide new teachers with tools and strategies that would successfully incorporate these linkages and business partnerships into their classrooms. AB 1223 also encourages the Commission to recognize this specialized training on a credential of teachers who have completed this unique course of study. AB 1223 supporters include the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, the Los Angeles Unified School District, the San Diego Chamber of Commerce, and San Diego State University. In order to make coursework more relevant to the real world, motivate students, and reduce dropout rates, I urge you to vote aye on AB 1223.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Block moves the call. File item 42, AB 1225 by Mr. Delatorre. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1225 by Assemblymember De La Torre, an act relating to emergency services.
Mr. Delatorre, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AB 1225 ensures that state and local preparation for public health emergencies are as thorough as possible in order to protect the public from infectious disease outbreaks, including the recent emergence of the H1N1 flu. Specifically, AB 1225 requires the Department of Health Services and local health departments conducting preparedness simulations to identify deficiencies in their plan and track implementation of any needed corrective action. State regulations require the completion of after-action reports for declared emergencies within 90 days. However, there is no requirement for preparing after-action reports for these exercises and drills. Recently, in December, the 7th annual Protecting the Public's Health from Diseases, Disasters, and Bioterrorism report was released, and in that report, they exposed serious underlying gaps in the nation's ability to respond to public health emergencies and cited 3 recommendations, all 3 of which apply to this bill. Number 1, to conduct an H1N1 after-action report and update preparedness plans with lessons learned. This is directly on point with AB 1225. Second, increase accountability and transparency. We require that all the information from these after-action reports be made available on their websites. And number 3, improve community preparedness. By definition, by addressing flaws in our current plans, we will improve community preparedness. Members, I urge your aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Delatorre moves the call. File item 45, AB 41 by Mr. Solorio. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 41 by Assemblymember Solorio, an act relating to insured investments.
Mr. Solorio, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill would require California insurers writing $100 million or more in annual premiums to biannually file their company's policy statement regarding community development investments with the Insurance Commissioner. This bill would also extend until January 1st, 2015, the sunset date on the requirement that insurers report their current community development investments to the Insurance Commissioner. The bill enjoys the support of the Consumers Union, the Greenlining Institute, and the California Reinvestment Coalition. It has no opposition. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Solorio moves the call. File item 48, AB 537 by Mr. Arambula. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 537 by Assemblymember Arambula, an act relating to public benefits.
Mr. Arambula, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. First, I'd like to tell you the reason for this bill. This bill deals with nutrition and poor people. As we all know, with the unemployment rate being what it is, we have a need to make sure to ensure that people, all people, receive nutritious food to sustain them through these difficult times. We also have seen recently an increase, almost to the point that it's an epidemic of obesity and related health problems to obesity, with diabetes and others on the sharp increase. We also have seen recently a desire to support small farmers who are growing locally grown produce and allowing them additional venues to sell their produce. Now, on top of all this, you have a federally funded program, the food stamp program, that allows low-income people to purchase nutritious food. But the problem is, and the reason for the bill, is that many farmers markets currently do not have a way for people who are eligible for federally funded food stamps to purchase food that helps them, their families, and also the small farmers and the local economy. What this bill says is that if a certified farmers market has not established a mechanism, a system to accept electronic benefit transfer cards, the EBT cards that now have taken the place of food stamps, then the state can authorize a nonprofit agency to step in and administer that EBT program for the certified farmers market. There were some concerns that had been raised prior to my taking amendments in the Appropriation Committee. This bill now makes it absolutely clear that a farmers market is not required to operate or maintain an EBT system, but that if it does not choose to do so on a voluntary basis, the state may authorize an eligible nonprofit to do that work. So for these reasons, for good nutrition for low-income people, and as a way to provide additional federal resources that we all say that we want to bring into California, I would urge and I vote. This will help people maintain body and soul. It will allow them to feed themselves in a nutritious way that will hopefully reduce health-related problems as we go down the road. And it will also ensure that our local farmers who belong to a certified farmers market have an additional source of income, and another source to be able to supplement their incomes and make sure that not only farmers but farm workers and poor people in general are able to participate fully in this federally funded program. And for all these reasons, I would respectfully urge and I vote.
On question or debate, Ms. Harkey.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I voted against this in appropriations because it was imposing a cost on the farmers and whatnot, and it just seemed unclear to me as to who was going to pay and if the state was going to absorb costs. It appears some of that has been cleared up, but there's still some questions with this, and I appreciate the author's intent, but I still think we've got some issues to go through. So. You know, we've taken amendments since the appropriations, I guess, that I really have not seen. So I apologize, but I'm going to have to just lay off of it. Thank you.
Seeing no other members seeking recognition, you may close, Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendments that were referenced earlier were taken prior to the Appropriations Committee, and the opposition I believe has been satisfied with those amendments. Their letters have not yet caught up with the rest of the file. But I would remain committed to working with any member in this House or in the Senate to improve this bill. I think that this bill, what it simply does is it allows people to access the food stamps that are already authorized. It will be additional revenue coming into the state of California. It will deal with the fact that many poor people oftentimes do not have ready access to nutritious, healthy food. We want to encourage fresh produce. We want to encourage locally grown produce. This will provide another market to accomplish that. So I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 45, no 0. The measure passes. Without objection, we will return to item 46, Assembly Bill 391. By Assemblymember Torlakson. Ms. Brownlee will present. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 391 by Assemblymember Torlakson and others, an act relating to pupil assessment.
Ms. Brownlee, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Standardized tests continue to drive instruction in our classrooms. We're facing reauthorization of our state testing program, the STAR program, in the next legislative session. So it's crucial that California take this time to examine the tests that we have been using. The STAR program is over 12 years old. We know that there are continuing debates on new content standards. We know that there will soon be a federal reauthorization of No Child Left Behind. We know that there are discussions about common national assessments, but we don't know that much about how the STAR tests perform, how they help us measure the achievement gap, or how they can better inform students, teachers, and parents about what is going on in the classroom. AB 391 requires the SBI to contract for an independent evaluation of the STAR program and provide it before the 2012 legislative session. This evaluation will inform the State Board and the legislature's discussion in the next session about reauthorizing STAR and about the goal of testing in California in general. AB 391 also asks how the STAR can be improved, whether it can be used to serve as for diagnostic purposes and provide information for parents and teachers on the individual student performance on individual standards. We need to build on the lessons that we have learned in testing both here in California and across the country, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote on AB 31 by Assemblymember Torlakson.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Ms. Brownlee moves the call. File item 49, AB 549 by Mr. Furutani. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 549 by Assemblymember Furutani, an act relating to the healing arts.
Mr. Furutani, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, the City of Hope Hospital and Medical Center deals with the most unique and unusual strains of cancer and other diseases. As a result of that, they are challenged to have the lab professionals that can deal with these kinds of situations and deal with them expedited ways and move quickly. One of the problems they've been having in the issue at hand is California's burdensome licensing process that has been a deterrent in recruiting some of these lab professionals needed to do this analysis. AB 549 permits the State Department of Health Services to issue a new clinical biochemical geneticist license so that the City of Hope can do their very unusual and specialized work. I ask for your aye vote. This will provide these kind of professionals to be able to do this work for the City of Hope and hospitals like them. Thank you.
Under question and debate, Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, request permission to ask a question of the author.
Without objection.
Mr. Furutani, I'm trying to struggle with the balance here with the state of California's interest in providing ever-increasingly detailed licensures for these professionals. Just to give an example, perhaps at the other extreme end of the spectrum, individuals who practice law in the state of California are given a license to practice law after they pass the bar exam. And there are, of course, many different types of law, real estate law, criminal law, civil law, etc. Similarly, within the field of biology and genetics, there are various permutations. And so what I'm struggling with, sir, is how is it that someone with an advanced degree and the proper specialization couldn't now get a license to do what they need to do? Why is it that the state needs to try to catch up with technology rather than having broad enough categories for us to be assured that they really know what they're doing?
Mr. DeVore, I think you just described the problem. It is a matter of catching up with the latest in science, and in this case, genetics, relative to some of these diseases that are emerging. We've been working successfully with the California Association for Medical Laboratory Technology and the California Clinical Lab Association to try to deal with this issue, but it's so specialized that it didn't fit under the general categories of the certification and licensing of these labs professionals. So because it didn't fit neatly in that general category, it's been obstructed relative to the ability to license these very specialized professionals. So they came to us and specifically asked for this new description and licensure for these individuals.
All right. Thank you. Then on my own time, ladies and gentlemen, I think that what we're hearing here is kind of an example of what we struggle with, and certainly I think the author correctly characterized it. What I would suggest, though, is that instead of adding yet another category, and in fact, as science, technology, biology continues to advance, we'll probably have to add several more categories as time goes on. Rather than doing that, I think we should go perhaps in the other direction and broaden somewhat the definitions to encompass more people, rather than getting more and more and more specific, down which, of course, we cannot foresee just how specific we'll need to be in the future. I think we should be going in the other direction, making sure that these individuals have the proper levels of advanced education to be doing what they're doing. And, oh, by the way, the entities that hire them certainly have an interest in ensuring that they're going to properly implement their job. So it's with reluctance I'm not going to be able to support this bill today, because I think that this bill is emblematic of this body's desire to describe, proscribe, and regulate increasingly detailed aspects of California life. And what you're going to see is, as you go down that path, you cannot possibly foresee all the various permutations that you're going to have to regulate and license. And I think that, like we do in the profession of law, where there's just a unitary license to practice when you pass the bar, we ought to be looking in that direction rather than going the other direction. I mean, we do not issue licenses to practice law in civil or criminal or real estate or contract, etc. It's a blanket license. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that even though the intent of this measure is certainly good, I think the direction we're going is emblematic of some of our other larger problems, and unfortunately I won't be able to support this bill today.
Mr. Furutani, you may close.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeVore makes some good points relative to the general issue of regulations and licensures. But the reason that the City of Hope came to us around this issue is because of the attempt to try to do it through the process. They have met constantly with obstacles and problems. And as a result of that, candidly, a lot of people that need to be diagnosed around these very narrow and specific areas of cancer and disease are not getting treated. So this is a bit of frustration that the response is a reflection of. They need to get this done so this person can get hired so they can save some lives. That's what we're talking about. And I appreciate the broader concern about general regulations and licenses. But in this particular case, after going through hoops, hurdles, and everything else they've had to deal with, they have finally come to this point, and that's why this bill is specific, and that's why this bill needs to be passed off of this floor today. Thank you very much. I urge and I vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 53, noes 1. The measure passes. File item number 51, AB 656, by Assemblymember Tirico. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 656 by Assemblymember Tirico and others, an act relating to taxation.
Mr. Tirico, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AB 656 has had several hearings in the Higher Education Committee and the Revenue and Taxation Committee, passed both committees. In that version, it was an extraction fee on oil to have California join the race of the nation in charging a fee and not giving away the oil for free. That version does not sit before you today, members. The version before you today is simply a report bill asking the Board of Equalization to report back to the legislature how much revenue would be raised if, in fact, we were to impose the 12.5% fee as proposed by the original versions of the bill. So this bill is not a vote on the extraction fee itself. It is simply a vote to allow the Board of Equalization to report to the legislature how much revenues would be raised by the state of California if the fee were to be imposed. Respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further members seeking... I'm sorry. Dr. Fuller.
Mr. Speaker and members, I rise in opposition to AB 656. This bill has been gutted and changed, and it is now a bill that requires the Board of Equalization to do a revenue projection on a 12.5% oil severance tax, that if it was enacted, and how much the percentages would be to higher education. This estimate already exists, and it's pretty easy to do. You just take 12.5% tax rate times the price of the barrel of oil plus oil production. If you would like an analysis of the economic impact of the oil severance tax, you can read former legislative analyst Bill Ham's report, and it talks about that there will be over 10,000 California jobs lost and increased dependency on oil imports costing consumers at the pump $1.3 billion a year. So I'm a little confused why we are still processing this bill. It was on suspense. It reappeared. It has been gutted and amended, and it's still here. And I'm just concerned that when it goes to the Senate, it could be changed again, and we could get it back. And for my constituency, this is a NUMMI issue. We will be hurting Kern County very much, and many of the other areas in the state, such as Los Angeles, Paso Robles, and Santa Barbara. So the bottom line is that while this is a study, we really, I think it's unnecessary, and I really strongly urge a no, because I think that it's not needed at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Nilo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question of the author.
I'm sorry, without objection.
Thank you very much. Members, my colleague from Fresno raises some, I think, very valid points. And in that vein, but from a different direction, I would request an amendment of the bill of the author, and I seek to find out what he might think of this. As long as we're going to report to anybody the impact of a specific but currently non-existing tax on a given industry, it would make sense to have that be perhaps a bit more of a holistic analysis. And I would request of the author that he might consider amending his bill to provide to these same entities an analysis of all of the taxes that are paid by the oil industry, as long as we're going to focus on that, as well as a potential of the severance tax, and compare the same circumstances that the industry faces in other states, so that we can see the full impact of what that might be in addition to that which already exists and circumstances that exist in other states. Would the author be interested in amending his bill?
Well, first of all, your colleague is actually from Kern County, not Fresno. Second of all, we have had that testimony in committee from the defenders of the oil companies and talking about the devastating impacts of investing in higher education. We've heard from the oil companies. It's part of the record, Mr. Nilo. So that question has been asked and answered, part of the current record. But if you are suggesting that we should amend the bill and rename it the multi-billion-dollar record-making oil companies, then I'm going to have to reject that amendment. Thank you for the suggestion. I appreciate it very much.
Mr. DeVore. Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in opposition to this measure. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're doing is we're proposing with this study to look at what a 12.7% severance tax on domestic oil producers would do insofar as the taxes and the amount of revenue generated. Now, it's important to underline the word domestic because we cannot levy the same tax on oil that we import from overseas. And as a result, what this bill will do is, over the long term, it will depress the production of oil within the state of California and increase the amount of oil that we import from other nations. It will actually increase our dependency on foreign oil, shipping both hard-earned dollars and jobs overseas, ironically, to oil producers that have less in the way of environmental regulation, less in the way of labor protection, and end up harming the California economy. Now, the proponents will say, well, the price of oil is fixed internationally, and so if you increase the cost of California oil, they can't sell it for anything more than what the international cost is. That may be true from an economic standpoint, but what that does not take into account is that you don't just drill a well and start taking oil out of the ground and then when you're done, cap the well and walk away. In fact, oil fields need constant injections of capital to keep those wells active and to extend the life of an oil field. Now, when you add a 12.7% tax on the value of the oil coming out of the ground, what you're going to do, and studies have shown this, is you're going to dissuade the producers from investing so much to continue to extract the oil out of the ground. And studies have shown that without offsetting credits for production and new extraction, as is done in Alaska, by the way, as is done in Alaska, which the proponents of this always, not surprisingly, fail to mention, unless you do that, what ends up happening is the oil fields end up having their economic life shortened by 3 years. And when you shorten the life of an oil field by 3 years because of the higher production costs, and then you look at the entire cost of, or the entire amount of revenue, what you find is that you may get a little more revenue early, but overall you won't get any more revenue because the oil fields shut down earlier than they otherwise would. Now, this makes sense because all economists, even economists of the left-wing persuasion, will admit that when you tax something, you get less of it. When you subsidize something, you get more of it. And so in this case, we're taxing oil made in California. Therefore, under the immutable laws of economics, we will get less oil from California. It makes sense. Less oil equals less jobs in the oil patch. Ladies and gentlemen, this sort of push in the state of California is precisely why we have the fourth highest unemployment rate in the nation. California produces almost 40% of the oil that it uses. We are the third largest producer of oil in the nation, and we tax our oil through all the various taxes, the corporate income tax and the fees. We tax our oil at the fifth highest rate in the country. The fifth highest rate in the country. We do have the highest gas tax, by the way. Let us not forget that. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill is bad energy policy. It's bad economics from the standpoint that we're going to be shipping more dollars out of California. And I believe it'll harm the job base in the state of California. I would urge a no vote. We already know what the impacts would be of this massive tax increase. Vote no.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. I said this in the Appropriations Committee. I'm going to say it once more for the full House. Everything I'm hearing lately has been, we have to fund education, so we have to tax this. We have to fund education, so we have to do this. We have to give books, so we have to do this. We are carnaging the jobs that these students are going to need when they get out of school. I mean, I am all for education and funding education, but we are pitting one group, working people, against students. That's totally ridiculous. We had 250 to 300 people here for the revenue tax hearing, and also a number for the appropriations hearing. These people left to come here to speak to us. They are in earnest concerned about their jobs and the future of their family. And I don't understand how we can keep saying we're supporting education. Where are these kids going to work? I mean, I'm just appalled at the sense of entitlement that we're providing children with education, which they need, but not providing them with the jobs that they're going to need. Our unemployment is 12.4 and rising. I just read a study. It's not expected to decrease. We're actually on an increasing curve, unlike most other places. Now, we can keep pitting the jobs in our state against education, but I don't think that's a smart move. You know, I have said for a long time we have some of the best universities and some of the best universities and community college system in the world here, and people come here because it is that. However, if we do not provide jobs for these people when they get out, we are funding an education system for the rest of the nation and the rest of the world. And that is not a wise use of our state resources. There are other ways to get money besides carnaging existing businesses. This is going to hurt small mom and pop places. It's not going to hurt big oil companies. It's going to hurt the small mom and pop producers, employers, and service industries. And we have to start on job creation. There is another way to generate revenue in this state, and that is create jobs, create employment. Take the noose off of our employers and allow them to continue to function. With 30%, 40% unemployment in some areas of this state, we cannot afford to be killing off jobs. Do you understand what that's doing to our social services? And we're thinking of even cutting those now with this next go-round. So, I mean, you know, you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. You want to support the students, but you don't want to provide them with employment. That doesn't work for me. It doesn't work in my district, and I don't think it really works in this state, nor has it worked in the last few elections that we have seen nationwide. We need to be focusing on revenue generation by creating jobs for Californians. Thank you.
Mr. Calderon.
Well, I rise in support of the bill. I'm not going to go over old ground. I do want to respond to the last argument. If we're educating kids here, they don't go out of the state for jobs. The jobs come here because we have an educational system. And in fact, we can do more to stimulate this economy, not by changing our tax laws or singling out one group over the other, but to have a community, to have a state, to have an educational system that supports business in terms of what their goals are. But I do want to, there's a point of information, Madam Speaker, and in response to my colleague who wanted a comparison of taxes paid in California, all the taxes paid compared to other states, I have done that analysis as it relates to Texas, one of the biggest oil states, if not the biggest oil states in the country. And all things being equal, oil companies per barrel pay 37% more in taxes. Now that information is about a year and a half old, and I've instructed my staff, and they're in the back room here, to take a look at those numbers. But if it's true, then we really ought to rethink about how we tax. We can't continue to be singling out separate groups for disparate treatment. And if we could come out with a tax that spreads it along the base and that is fair for everyone, that's the better way to do business in California. Until we can agree across the aisle to something like that, we're going to continue to have bills like oil severance tax and porn tax, by the way. But anyway, I ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Nielsen.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, I might extract a bit of verbiage from the Bible, lead us not into temptation. This bill spotlights a big pile of money. Repeatedly in Appropriations and Budget Committee, I've opined, don't come here. There is no money. Don't come here demanding more for your programs. Don't come demanding additional funding for new programs. There is no money. Raising taxes at this time related to the deficit would but fund what's broken, not fix it. In this particular case, it's a noble dedication to higher education, an area where certainly Assemblyman Tirico and I have great affinity and support. Although this bill just identifies the pool, I would suggest there may be kind of a perverse side to this, would be unattractive. When you do identify and highlight how much money that enormous tax would accrue, I think a whole lot of other interests are going to be covetous of it and be coming to the trough trying to grab that money. It may have the opposite effect. It is not, however, in my opinion, the solution. I'll not repeat the arguments of the economic impact.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in support of this bill. And if you've noticed, there have been several bills today looking at studies and looking at trying to find revenue and resources for education. And I think that's one thing we can all agree on, whether or not it's going to come from the oil companies or where the source is. That will be, of course, a subject of debate. But the issue of the importance of education at every level, I'm sure everybody on this floor agrees it's critical and an absolute priority for not only the state of California, but the United States of America. And in that context, Mr. Ruskin has been chairing, and I'm on the committee, a review committee of the master plan for higher education in the state of California. And if there's been one policy area where California has really stepped up as the national and world leader relative to education, and Mrs. Harkey mentioned that herself, it's in the area of higher education. The master plan is the pace setter for higher education throughout the world. That's why you're right, Mrs. Harkey. People come from out of state, come from other countries to be educated in California. But in those hearings, what we've been hearing across the board from the UC, from the CSU, and from community colleges is that the plan for higher education is no longer working in the state of California. That in fact the promise that was a part of that higher education plan, which was twofold. One, anybody that wanted to go get a higher education in California could get it at the CSU, UC, or community college level. And two, that education, believe it or not, at that time would be free. That was a part of the promise. Well, the free part obviously has gone by the wayside. And even though we call it fees, and us Democrats know how to change fees and taxes and how to try to manipulate that reality, well, we've been taxing the hell out of the middle class by increasing fees for higher education at every level, from community college, CSU to UC. I don't know if you've heard, but the UC is increasing their fees 33% mid-year, and will increase again 30+% at the beginning of September. So 60+% increase in fees. Now, if you're really well off and you've been putting money away for your children's higher education for a long time, maybe it doesn't impact you as much. If you're at the bottom level of the socioeconomic ladder, there's grants and there's other things that you can get in order to pay for those costs. It's the middle class, it's the working people that are going to pay the freight on higher education. But here's the reality if we're going to talk about economics. If our education system fails, which it's now on the verge of, if higher education doesn't do the job that it's supposed to do, it's not going to put people roughneck out on the oil fields in terms of jobs. What the educated folks are going to do from the CSU and the UC is find new industry, new ideas, new innovation. That's where we lead in the world with California. It's with new ideas and new innovation. And those ideas in education and innovation come from our higher education programs. So we better start realizing one thing. The public dollar as we know it now is not paying for the higher education system we need for the state of California for the 21st century and beyond. And if it's not paying for it now, we're going to have to find a revenue stream. This is but one study in looking at the potential of the oil severance tax. I think there's other ideas we're going to have to seek out. I suggest we go to the oil companies. We ask them if they want to invest in higher education in this form of a fee. Ask them if they want to use some of their massive profits. And I know they're a capitalist industry, and that's their end goal, to make sure that their shareholders get their share. Well, I think they've gotten enough and maybe too much, and they should reinvest back into the state and in this country, so then they will then be a part, as we all will be, including our children, a brighter future for the state of California. I urge and I vote.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of AB 656. And I want to point out a few staggering statistics. California is 17,000 doctors short of what it needs to meet the demands of an aging population. There are over 40 healthcare professions with job shortages. We're 1.5 million bachelor's degrees short of the pipeline that we need to produce to meet the demands of our overall economy. We fund education, and higher education in particular, at much less than we did decades ago. And the big picture economics is there. When we funded higher education and we made it affordable for California residents, our economy thrived. People found their way into the middle class. We had entrepreneurs, we had new businesses, we had excitement, and we had a thriving, robust economy. Today, we're not doing it, we're not sharing, we're not doing our part to see that this generation has the same opportunities that prior generations. And what's happening? Our economy is suffering. Our entrepreneurship needs to be increased and improved. The way to do that is to find a revenue stream to guarantee that each and every California student has an access to a great community college, a Cal State, and a UC. The way to do that is to invest in our children, and the overall economic health of our economy will be better off. We'll have a broader tax base, and we might even be able to lower taxes a decade from now if we invest in our children today. So what I say to the folks who say no to this study and say no to this effort to try to find a stable funding source for our children, be creative and look for something. It's not sufficient just to say no. Let's embrace the goal of trying to find a stable funding source for our children and find that funding source. Don't just say no. Let's find something that we can all agree upon if this isn't the answer. I think this is a good step forward to achieving the goal. But if there's another idea out there, bring it forward. Don't just say our kids are a priority and education is a priority and then not fund it to the level that we need to fund to stimulate our economy and make us all a better state. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm just trying to sort out the votes that people put up on the floor. It wasn't that long ago that you were asked to close some tax loopholes. It was Mr. Block's bill, AB 1178. And if you look at 1178, the idea was to close some of these loopholes where we lose money that ought to be going to the general fund. And the benefit to California would have been $120 million. Now, that $120 million is important because the same people who voted no on Mr. Block's bill would vote yes to open up the California coastline to offshore oil drilling for $100 million a year. So I'm not quite sure why it is we feel some people it's okay to drill off the ocean with all the risks, but we say no to closing tax loopholes. Let's put some things in perspective, what we're talking about with this particular industry. ExxonMobil, $188.55 billion in gross profits. Chevron, $79.64 billion. Occidental, $16.73 billion. And Plains Exploration, the darling of some of the folks on this floor, $1.79 billion in gross profits. But no, we don't want to know how much money we could generate by having a severance tax like Alaska, like Texas, like every other civilized state that has these resources. And let's talk about compensation, because it matters. The average unemployment check, and we're all concerned about unemployment, 12%. Average unemployment check for a Californian is $337 a week, or $1,349 a month. Now, if you're fortunate enough to be James Mulva with ConocoPhillips, you make $24,402,000. If you work for Exxon and you head that group, you're making $32,211,000. Chevron, you're making a measly $14,837,000 if you're David O'Reilly. That guy should probably get a raise. And so as we talk about the consequences to Californians, as we target people in wheelchairs, as we talk about not funding prosthetic devices for the poor, as we look to eliminate IHSS, let's not look to the oil companies, because God knows we wouldn't want them to pay their fair share. Vote aye.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Ooh, members, nothing like a good floor speech to get a man's blood boiling. Exactly how much money is enough money? Isn't that really the question my esteemed colleague is asking? When is enough enough? That millionaire over there, why clearly he's the beneficiary of all the goodwill, the hard work, the perspiration of those underneath him, and he deserves, nay, he has a responsibility to pay for that. As we sit in here, pulling down our six-figure salaries, I keep wondering about the people in Malawi who pull down $1,000 a year if they're rich. I wonder about the people in Cambodia who can live for hundreds of dollars a year. And I wonder, how rich is rich? And are we doing our part? Are we paying our price? This bill doesn't seek to do anything more than try to establish whether or not there is revenue out there to provide for something that should be a priority to California, higher education. And the author's intent is well received from this member who believes that we should. We should find the revenue. We should make it a priority. But lest there be any confusion about this, study or an actual fact, to ask one industry to pay a sin tax, the sin being apparently greed, to support something that's a public benefit for all people, is in and of itself a sin. Members, if we truly believe that higher education is the priority we say it is, and we want to investigate that question further via a report, then let the report reflect this. When California believes in something, all Californians should pay for it.
Mr. Gaines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would proceed with caution on this legislation, and my concern are pension plans. And there are a lot of rank and file folks that have pension plans that invest in stocks, many of which are energy companies and oil producing companies. And further taxation on these companies is going to reduce your rate of return on your pension plan. And that's the last thing that we ought to be doing to people that are hurting in this economy. And we really ought to have a laser focus on how we tax folks in the state and reform that. Look at a payroll tax holiday perhaps for a couple of months that would provide some relief to our constituents. Look at reducing capital gains taxes so that we can create more entrepreneurs and ultimately more jobs here in the state of California. So I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Mr. Tirico, you may close.
Honored to close on this modest measure to simply ask the Board of Equalization to report to us, the legislature. Apparently all of us care about working families. I'm really glad to hear that. But my question is, in my 5 years since I've been here, members, 5 years in the California State Assembly, not a single Republican member has ever voted to increase the minimum wage. The very people that you defend and decry today, you're here to fight for working families. Not a single Republican has said, I oppose raising the fees on parks. I oppose raising tuition by 12.5% or 25% or 32% this year. Not a single Republican has said, maybe we should ask those in California that benefit the most for a way of life to do a little bit extra. The way Governor Reagan did, the great Governor Wilson did, the way Governor Deukmejian did, and they said to California's millionaires and multi-billion-dollar corporations, hey, can you lend a hand? Because we're in tough times. So I'm really gratified to hear that all of you are so interested in working families. Maybe when we pass a budget this time, we can start and say, what are our values? Do we care about seniors? Do we care about kids? Do we care about the disabled? And maybe we can even use this report that says we can actually raise $1.3 billion for California, for all Californians, for higher education. Back when my parents came here as immigrants, college was free. I have news for everybody. It no longer is not free anymore, but the regents of the UC system and the trustees of the CSU system have told us that they're going to turn away 40,000 students. Where is the anger? Where are my Republican colleagues decrying this? Did any Republican raise their microphone and say to the governor, it's a bad idea to eliminate Cal Grants when he proposed that? Well, the answer is no. No one was willing to do that because no one on your side of the aisle is willing to say to who this bill really targets. You know, I'm amused by the whole small business angle because let me tell you what I said in committee. I'll just remind everybody. I said, I'm willing to consider amendments that take out and mitigate the impacts on small companies. Because the real targets, folks, everybody out there that's listening, let me just tell you who this debate was about. It's about the 4 oil companies that produce 70% of the oil. The big boys, ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, and Occidental Petroleum. That's who this debate is about. There are people in this chamber that will do whatever it takes to protect those interests and pretend to protect the interests of working families. I am willing to amend the bill. Have amendments been brought forth by a single Republican to actually protect small businesses? Again, a resounding no. So if you folks are actually ready to talk about moving this state forward, don't bring me your rhetoric. Tell me when you're ready to vote to increase minimum wage, to expand health care services for the poor and the working poor. Tell me when you're ready to move this state forward and we can have a conversation. But don't come in here and pretend that you care about working families because we're increasing fees on working families. We're closing parks. Our roads are dilapidated. This state is falling apart because of a pledge to somebody in Washington, D.C. That's what's wrong with this state. We're all not willing to cross lines. We're not willing to say no to our interests and our pledges. I have not signed a pledge since I've been here to anyone because my pledge is to the voters of my district and the people of this state. We must turn this state around. This is a report back. How much money can oil companies afford to give the state back? We are holding garage sales to raise revenues for this state. It's a joke. The governor sells off desks and says, we're not a Girl Scout troop. Okay, bake sales aren't going to cut it in a $100 billion economy. We actually have to do something real. Why don't we stop giving away the one resource that means the most and costs the most in California? Oil. If it's good enough for Sarah Palin at 25%, maybe it's good enough for California at half that. Respectfully ask for an aye vote.
The clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 All members vote. Mr. Tirico moves the call. File item 53, AB 963. Mr. Amiano, the clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 963 by Assemblymember Almiano, an act relating to public social services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Many individuals, mostly low-income working families, who are eligible for Medi-Cal food stamps and CalWORKs, unsuccessfully lose vital benefits because of complex renewal requirements. The duplicative reporting and renewal forms and processes for these programs stand to be reviewed in the coming years as a result of federal policy changes. This measure brings forth this necessary discussion in California. This legislation would establish a stakeholder work group using no general fund monies that would review current processes and forms of renewal and reporting protocols for Medi-Cal food stamps and CalWORKs. It would make recommendations for alignment that will modernize and streamline renewal for these programs. These recommendations will identify administrative barriers to the continuity of coverage, reduce county administrative costs, and will improve efficiency in the renewal process for counties and eligible beneficiaries. I respectfully urge your aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Amiano moves the call. File item 54 with amendments. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 973 with amendments by Assemblymember Strickland.
Ms. Strickland, you may open on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendments change the sunset date to reflect the Judiciary Committee Chairman's wishes for the bill so that the bill would expire and sunset in 2 years instead of 4. I'd ask your aye vote.
Any question or debate on the amendments? We will move to a voice vote. All in favor of the amendments signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The amendments pass. Add to print, back on file. File item 55 passed temporarily. File item 56, AB 1088 by Assemblymember Fletcher. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1088 by Assemblymember Fletcher and others, an act relating to veterans.
Mr. Fletcher, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. In the aftermath of the Revolutionary War, General George Washington said future generations' willingness to serve will be directly tied to how they perceive previous generations were treated. In California, one of the primary ways we treat those previous generations is through the California Veterans Homes. The number of veterans homes in California will go from 3 to 8 in the next few years. Our capacity of veterans we will take care of will double, and all of this is happening in a difficult environment with limited state resources. Assembly Bill 1088 will add a checkoff form to the income tax so people can donate voluntarily to the California Veterans Quality of Life Fund. This measure has enjoyed broad bipartisan support, and I think it's a great way for us to give the people of California the opportunity to support those who served us in previous generations. And I respectfully request an aye vote.
Seeing no members seeking recognition, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 58, noes 0. The measure passes. File item 57, Assembly Bill 12 by Assemblymember Bell. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 12 by Assemblymember Bell and others, an act relating to foster children.
Mr. Bell, you may open.
Mr. Speaker and members, AB 12 opts California into the Federal Fostering Connections Act, under which we would be eligible for a 50% match to help support our existing KinGap program while enhancing foster care support to foster children up to the age of 21 as long as they are involved in educational or job development programs. At its core, AB 12 is a homelessness prevention proposal. We heard from Kevin West last year, a former foster youth, who told us how on his 18th birthday, the workers in his group home brought him a birthday cake with candles, saying happy birthday, and afterwards asked him, where are you going? He was confused, but they clarified and asked him where he planned to live now. With that, on his 18th birthday, he realized he had nowhere to live. He slept in the woods, he lived on the streets, lived on a bench downtown at night. It wasn't until a high school friend and his mom saw him, took him in, that Kevin was able to get connected with a transitional housing program to help him out with rent, groceries, and school supplies. And right now he's currently attending a community college. Each year, 4,000 to 5,000 children in California, like Kevin, age out of California's foster care system. The first part of AB 12 allows California to bring in more federal money to support the existing KinGAP program. California's KinGAP program permanently places foster children in the homes of family members. It has been incredibly successful in reducing the number of abused and neglected children in foster care. This program started 10 years ago ahead of the Federal Connections Act, and now we have the opportunity as a state to share in the cost of this program with the federal government. Members, this is one of the few glimmers of hope we can offer California, and is what's shaping up to already to be an abysmal budget year. We have an opportunity to draw down a 50% federal match for a very successful state program already in existence with proven outcomes. And while we have Congress and President Bush to thank for the Federal Fostering Connections Act, we have the Obama administration to thank for the newly released guidance, which will make it easier for California to claim federal reimbursements for our existing caseload for KinGAP. And before this revised instruction, it has been estimated it would take California 6 years to achieve the full $60 million in general fund savings from KinGAP. Under the new scenario, we now get to have $60 million within a year of implementation. These are savings we cannot afford to leave on the table in Washington. The second piece of the proposal would reinvest our savings to provide foster care for the foster youth who are in school or vocational programs up to the age 21. In order to avoid any budgetary impacts, we took amendments in the Appropriations Committee to push the expanded foster care program out to 2012 and to phase it in over 3 years. So foster care will be offered for youth up to age 19 the first year, 20 the second year, and 21 the third and final year of implementation, which is 2014. Delaying the expanded foster care also helps take the state full advantage of an enhanced 80% state match we are currently receiving through the ARA, and this is suggested by the LAO. These amendments allow California to bring in more than our fair share of federal dollars to create savings that can be reinvested in our most vulnerable children. It is also a proposal that reduces incarceration and welfare costs in the out years, because we know from research that emancipated foster youth right now are more likely to get a high school or to not get a high school diploma, not go to college, not be employed, and are more likely to be on government assistance, and 368% more likely to be incarcerated. And we also know from the 2009 study from other states that supporting youth beyond the age of 18 returns $4.22 for every dollar invested. The bill has no opposition and is supported by 152 organizations. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Question or debate, Ms. Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Our treatment of California's foster youth is absolutely deplorable. For most of them, they can look forward to a life of homelessness, teen pregnancy, incarceration, welfare, even suicide. Their rates are some of the highest of young people, and that's why I'm proud to be a co-author of this measure. It is a fiscally sound proposal, and it will help our most vulnerable youth by providing critical support to foster youth who choose to pursue opportunities in education and job training, and also bring down additional federal dollars to California. I believe that we as a state should step up and support our foster youth who rise above their circumstances of abuse and neglect and who strive to make themselves better through education and vocational training. It is our duty to provide adequate care for our foster youth, and this bill helps give them a fighting chance of success in education and employment, and I'd urge your aye vote.
Mr. Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you know, as a freshman legislator coming in this building, I have a lot of true memories of people that have come to visit me in my office. But one memory that will forever be with me was when a group of foster children came into my office asking me to support this bill. For me, it's a no-brainer. To have spent 31 years of my life as a highway patrolman and to see many young people not have a fighting chance to succeed. By expanding this time for foster children to go from 18 to 21 years of age gives many young children here in this state an opportunity to succeed in life. I've often said that education will break the back of poverty. And this gives us all here an opportunity to help these children that have already had a significant blow in life, an opportunity to succeed, to get an education, to go on and better themselves. And I am very proud to be a co-author of this bill. I would ask everyone in this chamber today for an aye vote on this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, rise in support of this bill. I want to congratulate the author for it. I am down as a co-author, and I believe it's the right thing to do at this time, and I want to thank you, Mr. Bill, for this legislation.
Mr. Bell, you may close.
Mr. Speaker, this is the moral and fiscal correct thing to do. I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 59, noes 0. The measure passes. File item 59, AB 347. Scratch that. File item 60, passed temporarily. We are now moving on to Senate third reading. File item 61, SB 87, the Committee on Budget. Do we have that? We will pass temporarily. File item 62, SB 450. With Senator Lowenthal, do we have a pass temporarily? Ms. Lowenthal, was that pass and retain or pass temporarily? I'm sorry, that's pass and retain. Members, we will stand in recess until 3 p.m. Mr. Liu, for what purpose?
Rules Committee will meet at 10 minutes prior to session, so at 2:50.
Ms. Ma, under motions and resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to allow the authors to take up the following file items without reference to file. File item 1, AB 151 Jones. File item 2, AB 743 Portantino. File item 3, AB 978 V. Manuel Perez by Assemblymember Logue. And file item 4, AB 1590 by Solorio.
Without objection, the request is granted. Ms. Ma, you may continue.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to allow Ms. Strickland to take up file item 54, AB 973, without reference to file for the purpose of third reading as amended in mock-up form today.
Without objection, the request is granted. We will take that up when we return. The Assembly, Ms. Saldana.
Mr. Speaker, are we approaching time to take our lunch break?
Yes, we are.
If I could, please, as Chair of the Women's Caucus, a brief announcement.
Under motions and resolutions.
Yes.
You may proceed.
Members, on behalf of all the Women Caucus members, I would like to congratulate Ms. Connie Conway for taking on a new level of leadership with the Republican Caucus as Republican Caucus Chair. We have a congratulation card and a lovely flower. Congratulations, Ms. Conway.
Congratulations, Ms. Conway. Seeing no other members seeking recognition, as I was attempting to do, the Assembly will stand in recess until 3 p.m. sharp. And again, the emphasis, members, is 3 p.m. sharp. It is our intent to come back at 3 p.m. and quickly proceed through the remainder of the day's business, so please be back at 3 p.m. sharp. The Assembly stands in recess.
See you then.